Capitalism and having a free market encourage creativity and are key to making a country successful. But what if your money could earn you a type of dividend and improve the world simultaneously? Social investing, often called ESG, investing is the acronym, environmental, social, and governance, is about putting your money into companies that aim to create a positive impact alongside financial returns. And here are some of the main benefits. It aligns money with your own values. You can support causes you care about while still investing instead of just chasing profit. Your portfolio reflects what matters to you. Positive social and environmental impact, as well as long-term thinking. Your investments can help fund renewable energy, fair labor practices, and community development. While one investor alone may not change the world, collective action can shift entire industries. Social investing often prioritizes sustainability and long-term growth over short-term gains, which can lead to more resilient portfolios. I just love that concept so much, being in the nonprofit sector myself. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, the podcast spotlighting nonprofits and social enterprises with budgets under $10 million. My name is Dr. Scherck Wittcoff, and I'm excited to be your host. We bring you the lesser-told stories of organizations that are bold, passionate, and making a real impact. Perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Small and Gutsy is more than a podcast. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've recently been ranked number 8 on FeedSpot's top 30 social impact podcasts and number 3 and number 9 by Million Podcasts for the top 30 volunteer podcasts and for our youth empowerment episodes, respectively. We're proud of these honors, but prouder still of our mission to elevate the visibility of smaller but mighty change makers. Do you happen to know a nonprofit or social enterprise doing incredible work? Send them our way to Laura at smallandgutsy.org. Renewables.org is the organization we're featuring today, and it is the first nonprofit that lets everyday people fund solar projects across India and Africa for as little as $25 and get repaid monthly over 5 years, allowing impact dollars to recycle and scale rather than disappear after a one-time gift. I love that concept so much. Renewables.org is building a growing collection of high-impact solar projects in the Global South, financed by the Renewables Fund. A $25 purchase is added to the fund, and you are issued a panel which allows you to track repayments and see how much impact you create. So essentially, each $25 purchase buys one panel and funds $25 worth of new financing on solar projects. As soon as a panel is purchased, it immediately begins creating impact and generating monthly repayments. Each panel you buy is added to your rooftop dashboard where you can track repayments and impact. So there's a tremendous amount of transparency, and my guest will share much more. I'm just doing an overview. The model unlocks capital for communities that are often overlooked by traditional philanthropy and climate finance, despite having some of the highest social and environmental returns. Renewables.org fills a massive gap. Emerging markets have the highest impact solar potential, and yet they're the least financed. I just want to repeat that because it's really interesting. It's a huge gap. Emerging markets have the highest impact solar potential, and yet they're the least financed. The organization's open source impact multiplier shows its projects can prevent 5 times more carbon per dollar than solar in developed markets. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, director and co-founder Lassor Feasley. Lassor Feasley is a product designer and entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of Renewables.org, the Global South Solar crowdfunding nonprofit. Trained at the School of Visual Arts Product of Design program, he believes a design-first approach is essential for creating iconic, category-defining organizations and products. Before launching Renewables.org, Lassor worked as a design consultant, both independently and at firms including IDEO, Ford, and Gell Architects. At Renewable.org, he leads product, brand, and strategy, channeling philanthropic capital into high-performing solar installations that expand energy access while reducing carbon emissions. I also just want to briefly mention before I hand over the mic to Lassor, as Renewables.org was co-founded by Premal Shah, who also started the widely successful organization Kiva. I may have mispronounced all of this, but my guest will correct me, which has the same effective crowdsourcing approach to the development in the global South. The model unlocks capital for communities that are often overlooked by traditional philanthropy and climate finance, despite having some of the highest social and environmental returns. I'm so thrilled about this because I think about those traditional sort of that philanthropy might fund. And this is something that goes after a very different arena and allows your everyday person to participate, which I just love. I'm so excited to introduce my guest today, Lassor Feasley, co-founder of Renewables, whose passion is clear. So let's get started. Welcome, Lassor. You have such an interesting background in design. And I'm so curious how this transitioned into this crowdfunding entity that allows any of us to participate. And it also helps the world in a huge way.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for that introduction. You really nailed it, every single word. I could not have said it better myself. But you're right. I did come at this from a product and design perspective, and also from like a business model innovation perspective. When I started in this field, I actually was founding a for-profit domestic US solar crowdfunding business, which I called Legends Solar. And that business, it was really exciting. We had a lot of luck attracting people to commit to invest funds into projects, but we had a hard time finding assets to syndicate out to them to purchase and then allow our investors to invest in. And the reason for that is, well, the reason there is so much great demand is that lots of Americans have suburban rooftop solar installations on their garage, on the roof. They know it works. They often have these apps where they can track their solar productivity day. They love looking at them. And that's part of what inspired me to build this business. I wanted to reward that behavior.
I love
so many
that.
people check in on their solar projects every day, every week, send around screenshots, but there's nothing you can really do to enhance your impact. And I wanted to basically take that touch point and expand it into a channel for new solar investment. So lots of people were on board. It was very successful on the marketing department, but we could not find assets to fund. And the reason for that is that there's plenty of institutional investment flooding in to fund US solar projects. There is lots of capital availability. Now, there are other issues, like there's issues connecting to the grid in a timely way, getting through bureaucracy and red tape, integrating in with the existing power network that slow down solar adoption in the United States. But capital availability wasn't one of them. And so with a heavy heart, after about a year and a half of working on that project, I ultimately had to wind it down. But it was, in the end, a blessing in disguise because there really were thousands and thousands of people who were emotionally invested in this project. And one of them was a man named Premal Shah, who reached out to me around the time that I was closing up shop. And Premal Shah is a PayPal mafioso, but he's best known for having founded Kiva.org, as he mentioned. And Kiva was launched in 2007. It was built as a crowdfunding platform, one of the first crowdfunding platforms on the internet, which allowed you to lend small amounts of money at a 0% rate of interest to poor people across India and Africa, and you would get paid back in monthly installments over 1 year. This was a model pioneered by a man named Muhammad Yunus, who in 2008 won the Nobel Prize for inventing this microfinance model through his bank in Bangladesh. And Kiva.org really capitalized that. They're a nonprofit as well. But if you knew anyone who was techie from 2007 to 2012 or so, and even today, especially like Gen Xers, they'll know exactly what you're talking about when you bring up Kiva. And there's so much goodwill, and they still raise millions and millions of dollars every year for this cause. They've mobilized billions of dollars over the years. Yeah, it's a really crazy success story. And I would say more importantly, they've done a lot of work to build microfinance originators. So a whole logistics network to get these loans out across the global South, which then institutional philanthropies and other capital sources plug into alongside Kiva.org. And so they've really been like the Johnny Appleseeds of
Very
this
cool.
now multi-billion dollar industry every year.
Very cool, actually. I just had a quick comment, which I think is so interesting. I love the fact that you honed in on people wanting to check their solar energy levels and sharing it. And it kind of reminds me of everything from like TripAdvisor to Yelp to it's like a community effort, right? Like we want to know what people said about this, or we want to compare how ours is to somebody else's. I personally use a lot of diagnostics around how much I've walked, what my, just all of the natural things that you want to see. Am I progressing? Am I, or a ring, and all of these kinds of things. So we naturally have an interest in understanding where we are in that dimension, and then also comparatively. But you've taken that concept and said, okay, how do we then translate that into being able to make the world a better place, but still benefit by it and still be able to see through a transparency how our dollars are making a difference in the global South. And I love that connecting of the dots and saying there is a way that people do want to participate and help to make the world a better place and to certainly affect our climate and our environment. And so you're really doing that by reducing carbon in this context. So I just love
Yeah,
that trajectory.
totally. And I think this is maybe a place where it's helpful that my background is in design and design entrepreneurship as opposed to in finance or maybe in consumer marketing or something like that. I would always think back to when Instagram was founded, and the founders of Instagram saw that Facebook users back in the day, even I was a Facebook user, were dumping their pictures from their vacations and the parties they
Yep.
went to into these albums. And then over the following week or two, they would delete the worst ones and make sure that only the most flattering images made it to the top. And Instagram was basically created to tap into that behavior that was sort of latent and that was picked up by millions and millions of Facebook users, even though it wasn't really a feature that was ever intended. And so
Yeah,
you
it's
just
so
know you're going to
interesting.
face these incredible tailwinds when you're baking in a behavior that people just are grasping for in this way. And yeah, I think that they check their solar productivity because they want to make a climate impact. They're worried about the environment. I think others are worried about their electricity bill, or still
Yep.
others just want to feel productive, even when they're sitting on their couch and they can check in on it. And there's this machine which is feeding energy into the grid. It's just really satisfying. And so that's sort of the intuitive part of solar ownership and solar investing that I wanted to bake in to the product, first at Legend Solar and now at renewables.org.
That's so great. So then you transitioned, you connected with your partner. Walk me through that story of then how it transitioned and how your own design skills sort of created this next level.
So Premal wanted to adapt the Kiva.org model for Global South Solar. And what made it so appealing to him were two things primarily. Number one is that the metrics in general are going in the right direction for Global South poverty. And every year there are major reductions, in part because of the work that Kiva did and many others. And he recognized that climate was starting to look like the type of problem that Global South poverty looked like in 2007. The numbers in general are not going in the right direction. There are a lot of promising developments, and the proliferation of solar is the first among many. And yet, every year, there is more and more carbon being emitted into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
both in real terms and as a percentage. So there's plenty of reason for optimism, but we still have a long way to go. So that was reason number one that Premal was so attracted to this concept. And reason number two is that just like with Kiva.org, even a few dollars, 20, $40, that might not mean much to you as someone in the global north or in a relatively wealthy
Right.
country. can
Right.
really be transformative to a impoverished person in India. Solar is so much cheaper to build in the global south than it is in United States or Europe. As you mentioned in the intro, we believe you make about 550% more carbon impact per dollar invested than you would investing in US solar projects. And it's about one third the cost to build solar in most of the projects in our portfolio. Each of those projects is feeding energy onto a power grid, which is highly coal and diesel dependent. So each kilowatt hour of energy you feed onto the grid is avoiding 2 to 3 times more grams of carbon than it would in the United States.
It's great.
And then finally, on average, a solar project across our portfolio gets about 20% more sunshine each year
I was
than a
wondering.
US
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
European.
Because
So
of
that's
where
where
it's
the
located.
impact
Yeah.
multiplier is
Yeah.
driven from. And the impact multiplier, that claim 550%, I actually think is quite conservative. And the reason for that is that, as I mentioned, in the United States, there's plenty of capital availability. And I'll put that into real terms. When I would go to solar development and financing conferences around the country, developers were just hounded by an entourage of investors who wanted to get into their deal flow. The cost of capital is very low, often below 2 or 3% for the developers. So they're borrowing at very, very low rates. And large institutional investors left and right were acquiring solar developers so as to get access to their pipeline of new projects. It was a very dynamic industry. In contrast, Global South solar developers are basically full-time fundraisers. They spend much more time looking for foreign direct investment and other forms of investment to build more solar projects. And the siting of the solar project, the interconnection with the grid, much less of an issue. Right now, renewables.org works with just one solar developer. In the future, we would want many more as we grow and we can accommodate more pipeline. But I get reached out to on a pretty frequent basis, a few people a month who are CEOs or development leads
Interesting.
at Global South Solar Developers, see what we're doing, find me on LinkedIn or email me directly through our site and ask if we would be open to investing. And of course, that's the goal, is to eventually grow to a Kiva.org scale, bringing on tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for this cause every year, and then catalyzing all of these developers across Global South to catch up to the mature markets in United States and Europe.
What a great opportunity for them as well. You talked about projects plural, but is there just the one main project that you're focused on now to help grow that so that maybe then investors will come and be able to, or larger institutional investors will be able to come, and then you really can spread throughout the global south? Do I understand that correctly?
So there are about 16 solar projects which are managed by the solar developer we went to.
Got
And
it.
those
Okay.
projects are generating the revenue that the developer repays us and we repay our investors through.
Right.
When you get repaid, that repayment lands in your renewables.org account. And you then have the option to either reinvest that
Invest it.
amount in even more solar, or you can withdraw the funds. And the vast majority of our users will reinvest it. I think over 95% of repaid funds have been reinvested back into Global South Solar.
I think that's a huge comment on the trust people have in you and the faith that they are not only doing the right thing, but that they're growing an economy in the global south that will really be beneficial to everybody. So now I understand a little more clearly. So when, let's say I'm going to purchase a panel for $25, and then I get a dashboard and I understand all of that. And so does that $25 get determined by your team as to which of the projects it goes into, or can I be in multiple projects with just that $25?
The $25 is lent to the solar developer we work with, and they use that to accelerate their operations. We're very familiar with this company, and they only build solar projects that match our criteria and are located across the global south. And so because we're managing less than $1 million right now in user investments, this is a model that allows us to have a little bit of trust with the developer and be
Yeah.
a little bit iterative. In the future, I would like our users to invest directly into a single solar project or maybe put up funds, construction capital for a
Right.
developer.
Hmm.
But I think people appreciate that you get repaid the very next month. And that's sort of proof positive that we did what we said, that your funds were deployed, they were put into solar, and you were repaid out of that developer's existing portfolio of projects. And, with a lot of nonprofits that are soliciting donations, they'll reach out to you on your birthday, they'll send you blog posts about everything they accomplish. And it's important to communicate all of that. And as a nonprofit leader, it's hard to do it in a genuine or authentic way. I always like to say we don't do any of that. All we do is you'll start getting a monthly repayment report that says, here's the total amount we've repaid you and how much you've earned in the past 30 days. And of course, you can use that as a call to action to reinvest your repayments
Right.
or up your investment. But I try not to be salacious and just kind of let the money do the talking. If we had not been successful in executing our mission with your funds, then you wouldn't have gotten repaid. And that seems to resonate very well.
Right. It's a clear line. And I love the way you do that. And I think my question before was that the organization that you've hired to do the actual execution, they're going to use the money the way they see fit. And they're probably working on about 16 projects at this point in time. And so I, as an investor, personally wouldn't really know how to choose a project. So in some way, for me, it's so much better to have the experts pick the best use of that money. And then to see that return within 30 days does create that path of trust. And I can understand why 95% of the folks who reinvest, because they already see that there's truth in what you're offering and they can take their money within the next month if they want to. So there's always that option. So I love that because it really leaves it up to the experts. And there's a really significant, tangible outcome that folks are seeing. And then the question that follows for me on that is if you have a dashboard that tells you your investment and here's the outcome, does it tell you sort of the benefit of the community who is accessing the solar power? Or I just wonder where I'm sort of looking at the loop, right, to see how far it goes in terms of impact.
I would always say that renewables.org is an environmental nonprofit. There are many social benefits to building solar in general. Obviously, you don't have particulate matter emissions that cause
Right.
bad health outcomes. And you do have a more robust and reliable and cheaper form of power generation where these solar projects are located, which is good for economic development. But it is important to also note that we're not building distributed solar like on top of a low income person's home and giving them free energy. These solar projects are primarily on commercial solar facilities. So that might be a university, car dealership, factory, warehouse. And
Right.
you can see all of the projects in the portfolio on the website.
But it benefits the whole community in doing that, not just one person. And I think that's really what you're saying, because it also encourages economic development in those areas, because you can do more when you're able to have that level of energy applied to those institutions.
Yes, for sure. And it's not a coincidence that the places where you get the highest carbon impact per dollar invested also happen to be underdeveloped or in poor or rural regions that have a lot of underserved people. Yeah, so that is very important. And, there are maybe moderately developed countries that don't need a philanthropic model to adopt solar because it could be that the local energy sources are very unreliable, extremely expensive. Maybe they had a backup diesel generator that was depreciating and causing pollution and hard to maintain for when the power grid went out. And now they have solar and maybe solar and battery to replace that. And that's definitely a very widespread phenomenon.
Yeah, and a huge improvement for them on many, many levels, which is really interesting. This episode is sponsored in part by one of our partners, positively impacting the nonprofit sector, GiveLink. Instead of wondering where your donation went, you can now donate exactly what nonprofits need, from diapers to school supplies to hygiene products, and see photo proof when your items arrive. It's 100% free for nonprofits with no fees or commissions. If you're a nonprofit, here's your chance to sign up with GiveLink as one of their nonprofits receiving needed products and goods you select. Small and Gutsy is not just a partner, but is a recipient as one of their nonprofits because we signed up, and I'm really thrilled to partner with them. Check them out and sign up if you're a nonprofit, or if you're a donor and want to give goods directly, take a look at all the nonprofits listed on their website, which is givelink.app/en. And the link will also be in all of the show notes. So my recommendation is check out GiveLink. Thanks. And thanks for partnering with us and for sponsoring Small and Gutsy. Your role at the organization. So, and also the input that you may have had in design. Was the design more on the way this would roll out to the public so that anyone could be an investor? Was the design also in other arenas? I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah. So when Premal reached out to me, I think the extent of his vision for renewables.org was Kiva for solar. And so obviously there are a lot of decisions to be made. One of the decisions we made is that we would have monthly repayments, that it would be a 0% interest loan, just like Kiva, meaning that we make you whole again, but you cannot earn a financial benefit. Part of the reason for that is the regulatory burden of offering a retail investment is quite high, and definitely at our scale would be prohibitive. But if you don't have a financial benefit, you are not offering a security, you're not promising the world to anyone, and so you don't risk that liability. And then we also decided to make the term of the loan 5 years. And what that effectively does is it asks the developer, listen, we're going to give you what will ultimately be a scalable source of capital at reasonable interest rates, but you have to meet the consumer halfway. The consumer doesn't want to wait 7 or 12 years, which is a typical repayment period for many of these developers, and maybe a little bit more in line with the depreciation schedule of a solar project. We want to be able to get money back into our investors' hands quickly, knowing that the vast majority of them are likely to reinvest. Or re-up their investment. So that's what we ask of from the developer. And of course, what we ask of from the investor is to take that opportunity cost. You're not going to be earning interest. Right. We do what we can to de-risk the investment. And I could talk at length about currency risk and off-taker risk and things like that, but make you whole again, but you won't make an interest rate. And this also powers our model. So in the long term, we don't plan on ever soliciting a donation for operating funds to pay for marketing or salaries or administration. We're taking that balance between the 0% interest rate that we're borrowing from our investors and the interest rate we charge to the developers.
That's such a great, clean model. I just want to comment on that. And because the other thing I just want to say is not only is that really clean on the part of the investor, because they don't, and on you having to if you were able to make money on that investment, then it's really not nonprofit in some ways from that perspective, right? But I love, because generally when you donate to a nonprofit, that money goes, generally the nonprofit determines how they're going to use it. Not always, if it's an earmarked amount of money that you're giving. I understand that. But what's beautiful about what you're offering is you make the individual donor whole again, and they can either reinvest or use that money to another nonprofit if they choose to, or whatever they want to use it for. And in most donations, you don't even have that option because you would never ask for it, because there isn't a turnaround opportunity in the way that you've created it on the part of the folks who are borrowing the money on the ground to create these projects. So the percentages are such that you can use it to operate your organization and use the donor funds to really supply the loan to the solar specialist who's doing it on the ground, which is great. It's a really nice model because in other nonprofit donations, you never see that money again. And the nice opportunity that it's per month in some ways is that I think it engenders the likelihood that someone will reinvest because you're not waiting 5 years. Initially, you're just waiting a month. And so you think, oh,
Right.
I don't need this $25, $50, $100, whatever I've donated. I've been without it for a month. I can be without it for another month. And then that continues. So I love that. And the fact that you can track it and sort of be on a dashboard and see where the money is or how it's being used is also a really great design tool, which is where your expertise comes in and how you've thought about this whole project, this whole organization. I can't think of another one that operates this way. I don't know if you can, but I think you're the only one.
I would say there are only two nonprofits that remind me of renewables.org. One, of course, is kiva.org.
Kiva, right.
And Kiva does rely on philanthropy in order to pay their administrative costs because they're not taking interest rates from the individual borrowers.
Right.
And then the other one is called Donors Choose, which lets you directly fund classroom projects that are pitched by teachers to help their students
I've
along.
heard of that. That's great.
Yeah, that
But
one's a lot of fun too.
Do those donors, though, get that money back? No.
With Kiva, you do. With Donors
Right,
Choose,
donors,
no,
you don't. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's
Yeah.
why I thought yours is one of the very few that I've ever heard of that has this model, which is, I think, incredible and
Yeah.
really sets you
Thank you.
apart, frankly.
The financial innovation was part of the product innovation, but I am also a user experience and user interface designer. And so when you go to our site and see all the language and the way that everything's put together, that was also designed by me and a very small team. So I have a CTO named Scott Schwartz who is involved in the software engineering. It's the full package here. And I think that's, well, personally, it's very gratifying to be able to match the financial innovation to the design and user interface innovation. But I think it's also why we're so unique.
Yeah, I do too. And I kind of made that assumption that you were very involved in sort of that web aspect of it or user aspect of it. And so I think it's really exciting. And again, it taps into that natural desire for human beings to, for lack of a better word, it's like a little bit of game playing to an extent, right? It's that same methodology of saying, okay, where's my money? Where's it going? This month I'm going to reinvest. So it's that whole process. The same as we mentioned early on how folks get energized by seeing either how much money they've saved in solar when you were talking about your early business. So I love that model because I think it's both engaging and in this context, it's for a really, really good cause.
Yeah. And I would say so much of ESG is people want to feel in control of their money as much as they want to feel I'm doing no harm.
Right.
And ESG, it can only go so far. You can get involved and understand what the management team of your asset manager is thinking when they're making investments. But the idea is to use design and technology to give you a sense of what you're achieving in the world that's really tactile and intuitive.
Yeah, I love that. I think you've tapped into a piece of human nature that we want to grow versus the greed part, which, we all need to support ourselves. But I think all of us, at least in the developed world, often have an opportunity to give back and you're not asking for a lot, which I also think is really great. Your threshold is extremely reasonable. And you always think, what is it going to, what is my small donation really going to make a difference? But it really does. And so I love that you've created that because then it's sort of an equalizer. Everyone can be a philanthropist in your model. And that's a really wonderful way to think about being a global partner, frankly, or part of a global community. So it's really astounding that you've sort of gone from
Yeah, thank you.
one sort of for-profit to this nonprofit model. It's really great.
Yeah, it was a great way to maintain the learnings. And just one thing I'll add is that we have hundreds and hundreds of people who have put in the minimum $25 investment. And then we also have a handful of people who have maybe they're older, wealthier. They came from the Silicon Valley world and learned about us through the Kiva.org network. We have people who've put in $25 or $50,000 too.
I love it.
And so they everyone gets the exact same experience. Everyone is paid back pro rata as the funds generate and sell carbon-free electricity, and it works in every context. One thing I'll also quickly add is that you're able to make a tax-deductible donation into our fund. You get the exact same experience as anyone else. You just cannot withdraw funds. You can only reinvest them
Add.
as they're repaid
Mm-hmm.
back to you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unlocked contributions from donor advised funds, tax people who want to deduct it from their
Interesting.
income. And then very importantly, employer matching funds. So a lot of large employers will match donations made by their employees
That's
through their
great.
payroll software. And we've gotten hundreds of new users that way as well.
That's great. So let me ask you a quick question about that. For the donor advised or the donation piece, that is money that you would be like a typical nonprofit donation where you wouldn't, even in 5 years, you would not get that back. That's just a simple straight donation. Did I understand that?
That's a straight donation, but
Okay.
it's credited to your renewables.org donor account. And so you can see the money getting repaid and then redeploy it back into a new solar investment.
So you get to watch it even though you won't ever withdraw the money. Yeah, it's great.
Right.
Can you, if you buy a panel, let's say as a first time investor, can you at some point then convert that into a donation in the future?
If for whatever reason you wanted to make a nonprofit investment today, but then in a different taxable period, you wanted to donate it, then you can do that. And in that case,
Interesting.
I would just convert your account from a regular investor account to a donor addition account. And the only change you would see is that the withdraw button disappears.
Right. That's great. Yeah.
And
No,
that
that's
sends you an
really cool.
acknowledgement. Yeah.
Yeah, because, when people are doing social investing and they know that they're not getting a percentage back in terms of an added, that their money is going to stay level, essentially, at some point they may feel like they don't need it back at all. So maybe they, are at an income level where they can just, give just the minimal amount. And then maybe they give a little bit more, knowing that they could withdraw it in 5 years. And then the 5 years come and they've done really well. And they're thinking, no, you know what? I want this organization to keep that money. And then they get a tax credit at that 5-year point when they've converted it, or at the 3-year point if they've converted it. So I love the flexibility of what you've created for the philanthropist who isn't sure which direction they want to go. And you've given them 5 years to really play with it to a certain extent. And I'm hoping a lot of those 5-year markers turn into total conversions where they don't take the money back, which is nice, but it's not, no one is beholden to that. There's no shame if you take the money back and no huge kudos if you give the money. You just get a tax credit on your income. So I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful addition or extension, I'd say, to the model that you've created because it gives flexibility to the donor, which I love.
Yeah. And, we're always trying to accommodate new situations too, that we're working with a lot of senior citizens have minimum IRA distributions. And 4 or 5 people got in touch with me about whether we could accept that as a nonprofit investment or a donation. And we were able to do that. I may start to formalize that pipeline for the next fiscal year. And then also for our users with donor advised funds, some have asked for recoverable grants, meaning that they can lend into the fund and then have the repayments paid directly back into their donor advised fund so that they're not.
Interesting.
And that's something we've been exploring as well.
It's interesting and can be a little tricky, I think. I'm not a tax person, so I don't really know. But when you set up a donor advised fund, that for that year, whatever money you put in it, you can take it as a tax credit for that year. You can't take it again post that year, obviously. So you sort of want to use it up. So if there's the option to pay it back into the donor advised, if you've already taken that amount as a tax credit in a previous year, you just have to have really good accounting records to know if it comes back in, you can't take it as a deduction again. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
there's an organization called CapShift, which is designed to make these types of structures scalable.
yeah, good.
Obviously, this is something that your donor advised fund administrator, without getting too much into the weeds, is going to be very interested in to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are
Yeah, the
crossed.
T's are crossed. Yeah, but it is a nice option, and I love again the flexibility that you've created. So it leads me into my next question, which you've already started to answer: is what's on the horizon for as you grow and iterate? Where do you see this going? How large do you think it could get? I know you talked about institutional investing in a larger context in the future. So walk me through just some thoughts about that. I know this is just kind of projecting, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
I'm glad you asked because we're about to launch a major new software update, really a redo of our existing software platform. I've grown as a software developer significantly over the past year,
I bet.
particularly
Mhm.
because there are these incredible AI coding tools available. Basically, we're going to be able to launch the software I would have built all along had I been able to raise $1 million in
Uh-huh.
philanthropic donations in the first place. And that's going to unlock a lot of cool things. One of the first ones that I plan on exploring is the idea of working with climate influencers to raise funds. And so I could give
Right.
someone like a Bill McKibben or maybe even someone who was raising funds for a marathon, a way to open up a crowdfunding page and sort of
Love
have
it.
their own personal fund. And I think that would be, we do a little bit of media and a little bit of growth or new customer acquisition, but it's always very challenging. I always say Kiva.org back in the day, Bill Clinton wouldn't stop talking about it. He put a chapter about Kiva in his book. Oprah
It's so
Winfrey
funny.
had many
Yeah.
segments over the years. I
Hmm.
think Kiva was featured in every major weekend news program on 60 Minutes and all those shows. We don't have that. You can't just put something cool up on the internet and all of a sudden you're a global sensation.
Well, that was the first of its kind. And I think the whole idea, just like around sort of the TripAdvisor model or Yelp or any of the early ones where people's opinions mattered or people's evaluations mattered, right? Or in this context, the crowdfunding. I remember the very early days of crowdfunding. One of my sons came to me who really loved this author, and they were trying to do some crowdfunding. It was an investment. You wouldn't necessarily get anything back, actually, but he loved supporting them. And so it was a great way to support them directly. And I thought that was such a cool notion. And it was the first of its kind. And we're going back, I don't even remember, maybe 15 years or before. And I thought, how great that you're reaching younger people who are interested in just supporting an idea, whether it evolves into anything substantial as a payback or not. Now, they've since, of course, there have been payback components to a lot of those. But I love that. I love that whole concept. I love the concept of Instagram. And sadly, I think it's now, and I use it a lot for Small and Gutsy. We have an Instagram page and so on and so forth, because it's a really easy way to post. And I've now gotten in a rhythm to be able to do it. But I feel sad sometimes because so much of the Instagram postings are now ads. And same
Yeah,
with Facebook.
celebrity and branded content and ads. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
hard to
I
be
get it.
authentic and
Yeah. Or to be perceived as authentic when there's so much. Now, at least on Facebook, and I'm not sure on Instagram, I can't remember, they have to have the word ad above it, or sponsored or something, so you know. But in some areas, I don't know that they do. And I do find that sad. So I love that you are incredibly transparent, that you use the word control, which I love, that the control is on the side of the donor. And I really appreciate that because we want to know how we're using our money. And I love the transparency of being able to see once you make the investment, how it's used. You have a dashboard. Every month you get, a question. Do you want to reinvest it? Do you not? And I think that really says a lot about how you've designed this and also the trust that people have in you, but also the trust in human nature. I think there's a piece of that you are capitalizing on, that people want to feel like they will ultimately do whatever the right thing is for them. And in this context, it may have the impact of helping so many others. So I think it's really, I'm really impressed with what you've created.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to getting your new redesign of your website and, looking through it and figuring out ways to navigate it or enjoy it for just its information, because it's a way to do my own, learning and education about it, which is great. And I may become an investor or a donor, because I do think it's a great idea. And I think that I want to celebrate the work that you're doing. And it also helps so many others, which is, the way it should be and the way we should do it. So it's great. So toward the end of my podcast, I have a round of quick and gutsy questions, and they're really just fun. And, you can pass if you want. You might think of them as silly or whatever, but they're really fun. And so if you're ready, I'm ready. And I'm happy to ask you the first question.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. And again, you can pass if you want to. So what is at the top of your wish list for renewables.org? However, the answer can't be money or funding. So what's at the top? Because every nonprofit would say, we want $1 million or $10 million or whatever. So what's at the top of your wish list for renewables.org?
I've been very absorbed in this redesign of the software. And that's just going to unlock so much once we launch it. And it will allow our rate of improvement in the quality of user experience to improve so quickly. So that's really my wish is to launch this software and sort of unleash my designer mentality.
I love it. Because that's really your baby. And so to really bring it into the world and see how it works and how you've designed it is really, your intention is the impact. And so I hope for you too that is a smooth launch and a successful launch. How about that? If you were to think of a song that describes renewables.org, or it could be lyric if you don't have a song, what would it be?
Well, there's a Phil Oakes song called Power and Glory, which I think was intended to be his response to, was it Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land?
Is Your Land.
That's great. And that one is very jaunty, very underhandedly social justice oriented. And I always think about renewables.org when I hear it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the social justice frame and the belief that even one person can make a difference by bringing in a collective. And you're doing just that. So it's great. Which kind of leads me into the next question. What makes renewables.org gutsy? Because you are on Small and Gutsy, and I think you're gutsy. Hopefully you don't remain small for very long, but you are gutsy. So what makes you gutsy?
Well, climate is a big issue. Our mission is to accelerate solar adoption across the global south, and that is a very, very tall order. We have the precedent of Kiva.org, which really did so much to create this microfinance vertical, but we're also starting from nothing. We'll have to raise billions of dollars. We'll have to have millions of nonprofit investors join in. So it can be quixotic and Sisyphusian, but we make progress every day.
That's great.
And keep the faith.
Yeah, keep the faith. That's huge. And also that every step forward counts. Even if there's a couple steps back, every step forward counts. So I love that. Yes, it makes you gutsy. What is something that outsiders and maybe even a few insiders don't know about renewables.org?
People always ask me where I got the URL from. And Premal had actually also been experimenting in the for-profit side of solar crowdfunding prior to renewables.org. And that was part of his interest in my efforts at solar crowdfunding. So we were kind of running on these parallel tracks. Back then, renewables.org was a B Corp. It was not a nonprofit, and it had a very different model. That's something that I don't always make part of the narrative of renewables.org. I try and place the origin story there at the founding of the 501c3.
I just want to comment for my audience that a B Corp is a benefit corp, because a lot of people don't know. And I also think that that origin story, like so many, are iterative processes. So you started out in one and really saw a different avenue that was more beneficial to the people you were serving as well as the donor base. So tell me your other story.
The other story is that Premal met the solar developer that we work with at Gandhi's ashram. And they both were taking a career break. They both were not involved in solar at the time. And they both remained friends for many years. And so sometimes I like to place the origin story of renewables.org in Gandhi's ashram.
With Gandhi. I love that. That's great. I think that's a nice placement because they hadn't really been in the solar space. And so they connected. Yes. And maybe that kind of was an inspiration for them to figure out how to bring solar to that area. So this question is maybe a little bit silly, but it's fun. I always ask everybody, if you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about renewables.org, who might that be?
That would almost certainly be Bill McKibben. He has an amazing audience of people who are already primed to be involved in solar and who are so well motivated and so well informed. I've met with Bill a few times. I've had a call with him and went to a few of his book events. I would shake his hand, but we haven't had an opportunity to collaborate yet. So that's maybe one thing I hope I can get done in the next year, but we'll
keep our fingers crossed for that one, for sure. And you've been to a few events. So is he aware of renewables.org or just very cursory aware of it?
Oh, he's aware of it. Yeah.
Well, I think there needs to be
he's a very busy man.
I know. But I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for you because that would be great, and maybe there's an opportunity, as you pointed out, for some kind of collaboration, whether he'd endorse or talk about or write a piece on it. Who knows? It would be great. How do people reach you?
Well, of course, you can go on to renewables.org and my contact information is all over the site, but you can always reach out to me at Lassor@renewables.org, and that's Lassor. I am the only living Lassor, I would say. So it's easy to find me. You should just put my first name into LinkedIn or Instagram. Find me that way. Great. But I'm super open to speaking with anybody about renewables.org. I'm fielding questions every day.
That's great. And we'll definitely put your contact information and link on our show notes. So that'll be easy. So I just want to take a moment and really thank you for spending time with me, for sharing your insights, for talking about this incredible model that is really one of the very few, if not the only model of its kind. And I love that it's both for donors and donors control and also can be converted to full donor versus investor. And I think what you've created is remarkable and the iteration of it is super interesting. So I think you're doing a wonderful, amazing job for the world, and we should all jump on your train and help out. So those of us who can, I hope do. And it's not a lot that you're asking for. And it has a huge impact on the other end. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting this podcast as well. It's amazing to have an outlet and a different channel to get the word out about the important work that small nonprofits are doing.
You're welcome. I love it. It's my passion, like renewables.org and solar is for you. So it's a passion that you follow and believe in, and only good can come from that. So I'm really delighted to have connected with you. It's been really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please go to smallandgutsy.org to check out all of our episodes. And if you're so inclined, please purchase some Small and Gutsy merchandise, consider sponsoring an episode, or making a donation. Both are tax deductible and help keep us going and spotlighting these great organizations. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and don't reflect the position or views of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the donors, the sponsors, and my incredible board of directors, Brianna Carmichael, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Ari McCoy, Melissa Greitz, and Serena Rajabian, who believed in me in this project enough so to sign on to support this effort, and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. Together, we are spreading social impact, and you can help us. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to email me the name of any organization you feel would benefit from being interviewed, from small and gutsy to big with impact. I'm Dr. Laura Scherck Wittcoff, and thanks for listening.